Last year, I declared Fury 325 as my favorite roller coaster. It held this coveted title for about 9 months until I finally got my first ride on Velocicoaster. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that Fury 325 is an amazing roller coaster. Many still consider it to be one of the best roller coasters on the planet. Orion, which is the newest Giga Coaster by Bolliger and Mabillard, was first deemed inferior to Fury almost as soon as it was announced back in 2019. Well, we've had 3 good coaster seasons of riding Orion, and I think the critics are starting to warm up to this so-called Giga Coaster. Now that the enthusiasts have accepted Orion for what it is, I'm starting to hear some hot takes that might even rival Fury 325 as the best Giga Coaster. Well, let's find out if these statements hold any weight as we match these 2 roller coasters head-to-head in today's Coaster Duel. First things first, let's talk about the ride's stats. Fury 325 has a height of 325 feet, first drop of 320 feet, track length of 6,602 feet, max speed is 95 miles per hour, and has an angle of descent of 81 degrees. Orion stands 287 feet, has a first drop of 300 feet, track length of 5,321 feet, max speed is 91 miles per hour, and angle of descent is 85 degrees. Fury 325 almost does a clean sweep in this category, beating out Orion in 4 of the 5 stats. Each stat earns a half point, so Fury 325 gets 2 points and Orion earns a half point. Presentation. When you are entering Carowinds, Fury 325 towers over everything. It's the first roller coaster that guests will come in contact with as it flies over and underneath you. The color scheme really pops with its turquoise and lime green track. The use of the colors are well done, including the green LED lights inside the tunnel that travels underneath the park entrance walkway. As for the rest of the theming, Fury 325 somewhat lacks in that department. The station is basic, adding minimal flair with use of that honeycomb shape around the entrance and exit of the station that the train passes through. The trains are also basic, though it has a little style with its logo printed on the front. Orion actually has theming, which isn't expected for a Cedar Fair attraction. It's not heavily themed, but there's enough to pull you into the story, including a sort of pre-show building that has props and a couple TV screens describing the overall plot. Unlike Fury 325, where the guests can get up and close with this massive structure, once Orion leaves this station, the coaster leaves the park and travels back into the woods near Beast. I really wish the park would build some sort of pathway that would allow you to get closer to the ride because that's one of the things I love about Fury, but Orion is nice in its own way, creating a more exciting night ride. The color scheme, which is gray supports and dark blue track, I think looks nice. The train color scheme sort of fell flat as many describe it similar to toothpaste, which once you see it, I just can't unsee it now. Finally, there is one aspect that Orion has over Fury, and that's the soundtrack. Orion has a great soundtrack that pulls you into the whole space expedition theme. I love a good electronic soundtrack, and Orion hits it on mark. Overall, I think this category will nudge over into Orion's camp, but just barely. The better theming and soundtrack is what makes this a winner. One negative I didn't mention yet is near the end of the ride, all the storage, backstage materials just laying around underneath Fury 325, so it looks like you're traveling through a junkyard, which I think it hurts the presentation of the ride. Orion gets this point. The view. I've had this category in every duel, so why stop now? This one is going to be a tie. Both have incredible views, just looking at different things, of course. Fury, you get a nice view of the city in the distance. Orion, you get to look out into the woods and surrounding neighborhoods. Both create breathtaking views, deserving of 1 point. First drop. I'm also going to consider this category a tie. Orion has the shorter drop, but it's slightly steeper, meaning I think the airtime is just a tad more intense. Fury 325 has the larger drop, and I think you'll notice the difference. In the end, they're both really similar, and saying one is better than the other is really splitting hairs. Airtime. If I were to count out every moment that these roller coasters had legit airtime, both had a total of 5. Fury 325 has the first drop, treble clef, and 3 airtime hills. Orion has the first drop, speed hill, airtime hill, banked airtime hill, and that pop-up into the brake run. Now, the wave turn and turnaround on Orion creates some weightless sensations, but I wouldn't call it airtime. Because Orion is about 1,300 feet shorter than Fury 325, the ride has more emphasis on the airtime moments, but surprisingly, it kinda washes out in the end. I think this is another tie because it's so close. I can hear arguments for both coasters saying it's better, which is why a tie makes the most sense. Laterals. Orion has its giant wave turn, turnaround, and banked airtime hill. All these moments produce some decent laterals, but nothing ever getting close to the laterals that you will experience on Fury 325. That ride has some of the best laterals on any steel roller coaster. You have that giant overbanked turn, low to the ground turn, and treble clef maneuver that all produce great laterals. These moments will make me want to hold on to the restraint and fear that the ride could toss me out of the side of the train. Of course, you are completely secure, but those forces really play with your mind. Fury 325 earns this point. Ride intensity. Okay, so both coasters have that great first drop with strong positive forces at the bottom. Orion has that upward spiral that can create some strong G-forces. Fury 325's helix is somewhat on the weaker side, it's more drawn out and stays lower to the ground. Orion has the speed hill, while Fury 325 has the low to the ground high speed turns. Orion may have two moments where you might gray out, but Fury 325 makes you feel those higher speeds for longer duration. It's a close one, but I'm going to give this point to Fury 325. Pacing. The first half of Fury 325 has some of the best pacing of any roller coaster on the planet. It's all high speeds with crazy twists and turns. Once that coaster reaches the airtime hills, the trims kick in, slowing the train down, making the giant helix somewhat lackluster and pointless. The helix has a little bite to it, but after taking every element prior at breakneck speeds, this is a complete change in pace. The final airtime hills do redeem its pacing, providing some good airtime, but yeah, that helix really slows down any momentum you had going. Orion, though some might argue that the wave turn and turnaround are taken at slower than desired speeds, I don't think it hurts the overall pacing. As a Giga Coaster, Orion kind of feels more like a hypercoaster because it focuses on larger, drawn-out elements. Fury 325, you stay low to the ground, experiencing more of that high speed. This is another tough category, but in the end, I'm going to make it a tie. Orion has solid pacing throughout and doesn't overstay its welcome. You slam into the brakes with plenty of gas left in the tank. Fury 325 starts off like a crazy out-of-control hot rod, but loses some of that luster for a few seconds during the helix. The question is, would you prefer a more consistent pacing like Orion, or have moments of insanity but with a slowdown portion? That's why I'm making this category a tie. Best element. So Orion has a few good elements throughout the ride, but I think the highlight is actually that last banked airtime hill before the brake run. This moment gives you nice pop of ejector airtime as you're slanted, so it's a little bit of laterals and airtime. The same sensation can also be experienced on Fury 325 with the treble clef. However, the treble clef is so much better than any other element on Orion. You hit that element with lots of speed, you get some nice airtime and laterals, it's just a crazy moment, and then it ends by diving right down and through a tunnel. I think it's pretty obvious that Fury 325 gets this point. Alright, the final tally comes to Fury 325 with 9 points and Orion with 5.5, making Fury 325 the winner of today's duel. Many of the categories were really close, so I could see how some might swing it one way or the other. If there is one thing you can take away from this duel, is not to underestimate Orion. This is a great Giga Coaster that stands on its own merits. As I pointed out in this video, Fury 325 is the better Giga, but Orion sure gives it a run for its money. Well, that's gonna do it for today's content. What do you think? Was this a fair fight? Is Fury the better coaster? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and click on the like button. New to the channel, make sure you subscribe, that way you continue to get more great content brought to you by Extreme Thrills.